The Andes Mountains are a deeply unforgiving environment. The air is freezing and thin, and the slopes are nearly vertical. Yet by the early 1500s, this massive mountain range held 10 million people across 6 modern countries, united under a single banner, the Inca. They conquered this extreme vertical geography without ever inventing the wheel or discovering iron. Instead, they carved brilliant stone cities directly into the clouds and wove 25,000 miles of paved highway across treacherous gorges and massive deserts. But at the absolute height of their power, a Spanish explorer named Francisco Pizarro arrived on their shores. He brought with him a microscopic force, just 168 men and roughly 60 horses. In any conventional war, a force that small should have been crushed before it reached the first mountain pass. The Inca state was an architecture designed to be so unified that it could be toppled by a single, precise strike. The Inca superpower was shockingly young. For centuries, they were a modest, isolated kingdom trapped inside the Cusco Valley. They were entirely surrounded by warring tribes. In 1438, a terrifying rival army marched on Cusco. The sitting Inca king panicked and quickly fled into the mountains. But a young prince named Kusi Yupanqui refused to run. He rallied the city's defenders, crushed the invaders against all odds, and claimed the throne for himself, taking a new name, Pachacuti, the Earthshaker. Pachacuti immediately launched a military campaign that exploded outward from Cusco. As we see in this map, he rapidly consumed the surrounding territories to forge Tawantinsuyu, the realm of the 4 parts. He achieved this through extreme political engineering. Pachacuti erased all local autonomy in the conquered regions. Every single ounce of food, every physical resource, and every military command strictly flowed exclusively to and from the God Emperor. He took 10 million distinct individuals from dozens of different tribes and wired them into a single, highly centralized machine completely dependent on its head. Maintaining top-down control over a mountainous continent without writing or a monetary economy requires unique solutions. The Inca solved this with the mita, a strict labor tax. Every citizen owed the state physical work. In exchange, the government provided food, clothing, and security. The state channeled this massive pool of human labor to build the Capac Nian, a sprawling highway system that stretched 25,000 miles. They staffed these roads with highly trained relay runners called chasqui, allowing the emperor to transmit commands across the continent at blinding speed. To manage the economy without a written alphabet, administrators relied on this device, the quipu. By altering the die of the string, the type of knot, and the spacing between them, the Inca recorded precise census numbers, tax obligations, and military supplies. These brilliant communication networks created a highly efficient body for the empire. But because local leaders held zero independent authority, the limbs only moved when the central brain in Cusco fired a signal. Before Francisco Pizarro ever set foot in the Andes, an invisible threat traveled down the trade routes ahead of him, European smallpox. Native populations had zero immunity. The contagion wiped out millions of people in the 1520s, including the sitting emperor and his designated heir, who both died in sudden, rapid succession. The sudden deaths created a catastrophic power vacuum. 2 surviving half-brothers, Huáscar and Atahualpa, immediately plunged the entire realm into a brutal, continent-wide civil war for the throne. Atahualpa eventually slaughtered his brother's forces and secured the crown. But his prize was a physically exhausted, bleeding state. The centralized command structure was fractured, and he took control at the exact moment the Spanish arrived on the coast. In 1532, Atahualpa rested near the town of Cajamarca, surrounded by a hardened army of 80,000 warriors. When Pizarro approached with his tiny band of men, the emperor felt absolutely no fear. He agreed to meet the strangers in the city plaza. It was a fatal miscalculation. Atahualpa entered the plaza carried on a litter, surrounded by thousands of lightly armed ceremonial attendants. A Spanish priest approached and demanded he submit to a leather-bound Bible. Having never seen a book, Atahualpa threw it to the dirt. Pizarro used the rejection as a signal to spring his trap. His men unleashed a point-blank volley of cannon and musket fire. The roaring gunpowder, charging horses, and the sight of steel armor caused massive psychological shock and absolute panic among the unarmed attendants. In the chaos, Pizarro personally fought his way through the royal guard, grabbed Atahualpa by the arm, and dragged him away as a prisoner. By physically removing Atahualpa, Pizarro seized the single point of failure for an entire continent. The extreme top-down design of the state became its doom. The 80,000 Inca soldiers camped outside the city froze. Completely stripped of local autonomy and unable to act without the emperor's direct orders, the massive military was paralyzed. Desperate to survive, Atahualpa filled an entire room with solid gold to buy his life. Pizarro eagerly accepted the ransom, melted the priceless ancient artwork down into portable ingots, and executed the emperor anyway. The Inca people refused to quietly surrender. A successor named Manco Inca orchestrated a massive rebellion, eventually retreating deep into the jungle to wage a bitter 36-year guerrilla war against the Spanish occupiers. The Spanish easily decapitated the highly centralized political state, but the physical and cultural foundations of the empire, the Quechua language, the crops, and their gravity-defying architecture endure today, permanently woven into the mountains themselves.